In Australia. Welcome guys, good to see you all here. A couple of questions building on what Brian's been talking about. What do you think you can learn from the Europeans in the way that they approach their running?
I'll take that one. I think the way they approach running over here is almost the ideal way in terms of the kinds of courses they like to create and the sort of excitement the whole culture has about endurance sport. But yeah, the more difficult courses we can have in the States, the better, I think. Higher, steeper, more technical. That's kind of the way that what happens in Europe. And I wish there was more of that in the States. I think probably everyone does.
Yeah, I think that.
Is that a case because a lot of your trails aren't necessarily open up to races? There's a lot of in France, there's 50, 60 races like this that you could do every year.
Yeah,
Do you think there's more races needed in the US too?
Well, in the US, I think a lot of the steepest and gnarliest mountains are protected by wilderness areas or national parks, and so we can't have races there. And I also think the Europeans come with a different sort of mindset to races. They're really anal about, or not anal, but you know what I mean. They really focus on like times and splits and what they're going to carry where and all these things that the Americans, like Jeff's a good example. He's just going to sort of go out there and run,
yeah.
But. Whereas, Europeans, I think they seem to focus more on like exact splits, and they just seem to focus more on like the technical details of the race.
So talking of running, Jeff, you put the cat amongst the pigeons a bit this week in terms of what is an ultra, is it just running, different formats? Just want to expand your views on that. There's been a lot of comments. Have you taken those on board? And
I haven't looked at any comments, but I can imagine. I definitely wrote that post on I Run Far, just very aware that it would be a little bit controversial in terms of like the road versus trail dynamic, and it's more just my thoughts in a nutshell are just that I think there's just more and more people running, longer than the marathon distance who are just primarily trail runners, and they're doing it because it makes a lot of sense to run really far on the trails, because the reasons why you run on trails go hand in hand with running really far, I think. I feel like virtually everyone that I sort of train with and run with who runs ultras also sort of pretty exclusively races on trails, and you'll get occasional road stretches in races, or you'll do some training on roads, but I think I can speak for all of us here. I don't expect to see anybody sitting here out running like a 100-mile flat road race like anytime soon.
Well, it's kind of just what you seek out in training too. Is if you want to, we talk more about the mountains or the line or what we're going to go run rather than the actual running piece. And so it's more about, let's go to this place and run this peak and do that. And so on the road, it's a little less. It's more about running, and so it's more about saying, we could go run these times, and it's more regimented. Whereas I think in trail running, it becomes more about the elements or the places that you're going to go run than just the actual times. And that's often the question that comes up is how fast would you run like a 50 mile or 100 mile? It's just so dependent on the course, obviously, and so there it really becomes more about where you're running as opposed to just running itself.
do you think there'll be as much interest in the US this weekend on you guys performing here back home compared to the amount of obviously media interest in Europe alone?
Well, thanks to Brian.
I actually want to jump in here for a second. One of the things on that, it's going to be a little difficult in that it starts at 11 o'clock p.m. Friday night in Mountain Time. Like I'm going to be out there with some of you guys covering this live, trying to cover it as well as we can live, but it's through the middle of the night, so it's a little rough.
It'd be interesting to see how many Twitter followers you have, I suppose. See if people stay up and actually follow along,
Yeah.
Because I think there's an expectation that you guys are going to have to start performing on this side of the pond for you to continue to be seen as competitive. A slightly controversial statement or polarizing statement, but say, for example, you don't get top 5 or top 10 here, will there be the usual UTMB post backlash that the Americans?
I'm sure there will if that happens.
Yeah.
It's inevitable.
I think we'll have someone in the top 5, though.
Good.
I mean, we definitely like at the top level, American men really like not every single one of them, but many of us had just horrible runs at UTMB, and there's no denying that. And whether or not that's something to do with a larger dynamic or if it was just sort of an unusually bad day for a lot of us, it's hard to say. But certainly, if a similar thing happens here, if we collectively either do like significantly worse than maybe we would expect or significantly better, there's going to be, I'm sure, a pretty large response and backlash to either one. But
And as the globe gets smaller and the Skyrunning Federation is looking to expand its brand globally across the 5 continents, there is an expectation and potentially that you need to turn up in any continent and race well. Do you think that gives the Europeans an advantage over the Americans?
Not anymore, I think. I mean, look how many Americans are racing out here today or tomorrow. I think that, like you say, that to compete on the world scale, we're gonna have to compete internationally a lot more. I think that's definitely true. The classic races aren't just in America. They're in Europe, they're in Japan, they're in Australia. They're all over the place now, and I think that's great.
yeah.
Any plans coming down to Australia? I know, Anton, you got as far as New Zealand, but didn't quite get over to us.
Well, I got over to Melbourne, but yeah.
Oh, briefly you went to Melbourne.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't know if I have any plans to race in Australia anytime soon. It seems like the Blue Mountains 100K, is that tomorrow as well?
Next weekend.
Next weekend?
Yeah, Ryan
Seems-
Sanders is the...
Yeah, it seems pretty interesting. I'll probably make it back down to New Zealand next year to Tarawera.
Beautiful. Isn't it?
It's because I had so much fun this year, but yeah.
Any others?
Nothing specific, but I could see myself running anywhere anytime soon.
Great. Thanks, gents. Appreciate your time.
I'll just come in with a few questions if that's okay. Following on with what was said about the races in America and Europe, I mean, if we think about most of the classics, Western States hard rock, they're firmly fixed in the ultra calendar. So, from an American perspective, what is the attraction for you to come over to Europe? And is there an attraction?
What's the attraction to do any different race, right? It's like if you do a race and you feel like you did it well, then you want to try something new. And maybe that next race is in America, maybe it's in Europe, maybe it's in La Palma.
Or to experience a new place in the world.
Yeah, the novelty for sure.
There's a whole globe other than the United States there to explore.
It's also pretty iconic races, like coming over to UTMB, you're running around Mont Blanc, so it's pretty special. And then I guess you could look at Hard Rock and Western States as having that same sort of or similar kind of appeal, where they're really cool courses. And, so I think there's something about, and coming here, for instance, you're going to run all the way across the island, and so there's a special piece about being able to do that.
Yeah.
And the Transvulcania, it's been built up in the media, particularly by Skyrunning, about being the race of the decade. Do you think it is? And does such a thing exist?
We can't know that now. It's 2012.
But if you look at the start list, I mean, it is an impressive start
Oh
list.
yeah,
And from the perspective of, as you said, the amount of cameras, recorders pointing at you, there is an expectation that this is a race that a lot of people have wanted to see, and it's now happening.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's a big part of the reason why I'm here too. It's just getting a chance to run. So many top runners, not just from home but from around the world. I think it's going to be huge in terms of the competition.
I also think. Well, sorry, Jeff.
No.
I think we keep talking about where the sport's going, where's it's headed internationally. I mean, it's just a sign of these bigger races, the more iconic races. The fields are going to be more and more like this. I mean, I think if it continues to develop and grow, every single year you're going to be able to say that this is the start list of the decade.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's, maybe at this point it's the start list to watch right now, but there's two other
Wait for
three
Western
other,
States.
yeah, I know, Western States, Hard Rock. I mean, UTMB again. Every single race is going to be a race to watch in terms of the depth of the field. So it's certainly exciting to be a part of and fun, but I don't think it's going to become the norm probably.
And Skyrunning are arranging a conference to discuss the future of the sport this week. what do you think your involvement as runners will be in that?
I have no idea.
Well, do you have an agenda? Do you have a thought process that that you'd like to pass over?
What was that,
Which
Joe?
direction?
Fixed ropes and 100 miles?
Yeah, I think we all kind of like the general approach that skyrunning has to designing courses that are steep, hard, and those sort of minimum requirements of vertical and that. So everyone's pretty in line with that. So I think we'll all be in agreement.
Yeah, I think that is sort of the future of ultra running in a lot of ways. At least in trail ultra running, it's that sort of coming together of more of the sky running ethic of like really steep, gnarly courses,
taking that to long
high up in the mountains. And there's a lot of ultras out there that have that now, but not nearly as many as what I think. There's a much larger demand for that than what the actual events are supplying right now.
I mean, in all of us almost, it's in training, like, it's like Joe was saying earlier, it's like you go out and you see a mountain range and you pick a line or something and you end up doing just whatever it takes to get through that course is what you do. Not necessarily logging a certain number of miles, staying on trail, all that, So it'd be nice to have races that more closely mimic what we like to do in training, I guess.
Yeah.
And the Speedgoat 50 is going to be part of the new Sky thing.
Yeah.
Any of you planning on being at that race?
I hope to.
Yep.
So pretty much all of
Not this year, but
Well, it's an interesting course because it's just all around one mountain, but somehow Carl manages to make it flow really well. And so you think it's going to be a pretty contrived, kind of just repeats on this one hill, and you actually get a completely different perspective. You can kind of approach the mountain from all the different angles, and it's really spectator friendly, which is kind of unique in the US. There's not that many courses where here you can actually take a chairlift to the top and see the whole race unfold right underneath you. So that's I think pretty unique, and will be interesting to see how it turns out in terms of spectators and just people getting involved in the race.
And it'll be nice to see the European contingent that's here coming over to the Speedgoat and you racing them on home ground.
They'll like the course, I think.
Okay guys, thanks very much.
thanks.